just like Mama used to make. Hello, welcome to WayPoint Survival. Today, we're going to talk about hobo dandelion fritters, a food that a hobo might make and eat if he couldn't find anything else. Stay tuned. So the hobos of the classic era, they were a unique bunch of people. And as I've said before, probably about 2 million men hit the road and railroads and all of that. They walked a lot of places, went thousands of miles on foot, and they did a lot of different jobs. There were cowboys, and there were folks that would go on cattle drives and had that kind of skill. There were people who knew about the farms, and they would go farming, and they would find perhaps some work like that as an agricultural helper. But often after the job played out, and it might only last for an afternoon, might only last for a couple of days, maybe a week or two if they were fortunate. But eventually they'd find themselves back out walking the cinders. And it was a tough life. You didn't have good shoes, you'd wear them out, and those rails would stretch out in front of you, mile after mile after weary mile. So, needless to say, if you could find something to eat, you'd eat it. And they often knew how to forage and fish and hunt with the best, not because they were just born experts, but out of necessity. As many hobos did, he would walk along the tracks for many miles perhaps, until he found a suitable location where he could bed down for the night. Now, it would be nice if he could find a place that was sheltered, but very often he would just have to find a place where he could roll up in the blanket and the bedroll, maybe against a fence somewhere or under the shade of a large tree. It would just be an area where he could bivouac, spend the night for a few hours, and get up the next morning and resume his long, weary trek trying to find work. There might not be a train for hours or even days, depending on the location and where he ended up. And of course, sometimes they got booted off trains in the middle of nowhere, and they just had to look for what they had locally. And you'd walk a lot of miles, and you'd be very hungry and very thirsty by the time you got to a place where you could find some sort of sustenance. When you were out on the road, you always wanted to find a nice, soft place to sleep if possible. The ground was hard enough as it was. And so a place like this, right in the middle of the forest with a lot of soft, deep greenery, would be just about perfect. Well, he had a real good night's sleep, and it didn't rain, which was a boon. So he was glad to get up and get going, but boy, did his stomach grumble. He was hungry for sure. He had to find something to eat, and pretty soon, too. It was time to stow the blanket, head out onto the road one more time. He had seen some bright yellow dandelions growing along the tracks and out along the fields where he had camped that night, and that gave him an idea. Along with what meager rations he still had, perhaps he could have a pretty good morning breakfast after all. Beautiful morning. And now it's time for him to pick a few of those golden dandelions to make a lunch just like his mother made. Within just a few moments of time, he had picked a good panful. And then going to the stream nearby, he scooped up a pot of fresh water. Soon he returned with the water, and it was time to soak the dandelions in some salt and water. This was done because the salty water would help clean the flowers and would drive off any bugs or bees that might still be hidden inside the petals, as well as the fact that the salt would also slightly flavor it and make it taste better. Now these needed to soak for 30 minutes or so to make sure that everything was well salted and soaked in the salty brine. And so while the dandelions were soaking, it was time to get a fire started. Well, it wasn't long until he had a good fire blazing and a few more sticks gathered to keep it going, and it was time to work on the next phase of his meal. He still had a few items left over from his last visit to a farmhouse where he had chopped some wood, which was pretty common for him back in those days because a lot of people needed firewood for their stoves, and it was a job that they were willingly ready to let someone else do if they could get to it. So with those items in hand, he began to make a batter to dip the dandelions in. The batter was simply some flour and adding some of the salt water. And then he was fortunate enough to have an egg, which he carried in with a little bit of oatmeal to keep it from getting broken. With those three ingredients, he began to mix them for his batter to dip the dandelions into. A little more flour for good measure. When he had it to the right consistency, he set it aside for just a moment. Next, he wanted to drain the excess salt water. Poured that off. Then it was time to open his little tin of lard and get some out for deep frying the dandelions in. Now to put it over the fire. While the lard was melting, it was time to put the batter on the dandelions. And now into the lard they go. Well, it didn't take long, and they were looking pretty good. This was truly going to be a feast for a hobo king. Well, in short order, they were done and looking pretty tasty. He was really looking forward to it. It's been a while since he'd had food like this to eat. He was just grateful he was able to find enough supplies to make it happen. So setting the fritters to the side, it was time to put the coffee pot on. And of course, must add some coffee. Well, that was the last of the can, what he had in there. So hopefully it would be enough. My, did that look good. One thing that he must do, he must keep all the lard that he has. It's too valuable to waste. So back into the tin it goes. Well, pretty soon the coffee was done and the fritters were still warm. It was time to enjoy his meal. Well, if there was anything he had learned in the years that he had been out on the open road as a hobo, it was that you always had to thank divine providence for whatever meal you had. And now it was time to taste the delicious food and see if he had done it right. And oh my, did that taste good. That first bite was almost like heaven. Well, it didn't take long, and he was thoroughly enjoying his meal and a good cup of coffee with plenty more to go after that. Just like Mama used to make. Truly, it was a life of satisfaction. As he finished his last cup of coffee, he sat there thinking for a while about his life and all the wonderful experiences that he had had while out on the road. Well, enough of that. Time to clean everything else up and pack it in the bag and hit the road once more. And so, while the afternoon sun blazed down upon him, he wiped out his cookware and stashed it away for another meal. He had previously gone down to the small creek and scoured out the rough particles with some bits of sand and creek water. Now all that remained was to wrap everything up and stow it carefully away. Well, that did it. Everything's put up, stowed in its proper place, coffee pot stowed safely inside the blanket, and everything where it won't rattle and shake around or get banged up climbing on and off of the next boxcar or flatbed, whatever he could find, or just so that it would ride comfortably against the small of his back as he hauled it down the many miles to hopefully his next job. Well, I hope you've enjoyed another foray into the life of the classic hobo. The things that they did, what they ate, how they slept, how they lived, how they worked. And many of them lived long and productive lives. Many of them didn't make it, and they passed away very young. It was a hard life. It was always a difficult and dangerous life, but it was one full of adventure, and there was always something waiting around the next bend. This is James Bender for WayPoint Survival. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure and check out the links in the description box below, just under the More button. While you're down there, you'll find the link for our WayPoint Survival digital class. This is where you can train in the comfort and convenience of your own backyard the top 20 skills that we consider to be the most important from our Phase 1 Survival and Bushcraft class. You'll also find out where you can sign up for the WayPoint Survival and Prepping 101 newsletter, absolutely full of great ideas about survival and bushcraft and staying prepared for whatever might come. Coming to your inbox at least once, if not twice a week. You're really going to enjoy it. Make sure and sign up for that, and it's totally free. You'll also find our waypointsurvival.com link, which is where you can sign up to take in-person classes at our beautiful training facility in Southern Ohio. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it. And when you do subscribe, make sure and press that bell button so that you can stay notified of all of our upcoming videos, and we'll talk to you next time.